We're extremely scared that China is going to beat us in terms of developing cutting edge technologies. One is the Arctic, two is the Baltic Sea, three is Kaliningrad, four is Belarus, five is Moldova, and there's a sixth one, the Black Sea. These are all locations in Eastern Europe where big trouble could start. Europeans, Americans, Indians, we're going to trade with the Chinese. But at the same time, you're going to have a wicked and very dangerous security competition in East Asia. Both China and the United States got much richer during the unipolar moment when we had globalization. And he's, of course, correct. And the United States didn't care about that because the United States thought that once China got really rich and it got embedded in international institutions, it would become a responsible stakeholder, to use Robert Zellick's term, and then it would become a democracy. And once it was a democracy, we'd all live happily ever after. This would be the end of history. That was the basic idea. But it didn't turn out that way because once China got really powerful economically, it translated that economic might into military might, and it began to throw its muscle around. And this, of course, scared the living bejesus out of the Americans, and the Americans have moved to counter China. We now care about relative gains. See, Eric was talking about absolute gains where we're both getting rich. And we didn't care about relative gains then. But now that China is a great power, we care about relative gains. So what we want to do is we want to maximize American growth and we want to minimize Chinese growth. Anything we can do to slow down the Chinese economy and refurbish the American economy, we will do. And you see this reflected in the competition over cutting edge technologies. We're extremely scared that China is going to beat us in terms of developing cutting edge technologies. Now, where do tariffs come in? Tariffs are part of the story. What we're trying to do with tariffs is modernize, refurbish the American industrial base, make us much more competitive, and we're trying to weaken China at the same time. Because again, we care about relative power. And all of this is to say that I agree with you, Liz, that we made a fundamental mistake in the 1990s and in the first 20 years of the 21st century in helping China to become Godzilla. It's come back to haunt us, and we're now trying to rectify that. And again, tariffs are part of that story. I think the way to think about the world we're moving into is to separate the economic from the security competition, and think about it in the context of pre-World War I period, not the Cold War. You're probably saying to yourself, what is he talking about? Before World War I, here in Europe, there was a huge amount of economic intercourse among all of the states. There was a huge amount of economic interdependence here in Europe. Nevertheless, at the same time, you had two powerful security blocs. One was the Triple Entente, which was France, Britain, and Russia. And the other was the Triple Alliance. Germany, of course, was the key player, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. And you had this intense security competition before World War I that, of course, in August 1914, led to World War I. But at the same time you had this intense security competition, you had all this economic interdependence. Fast forward to the Cold War, when I grew up, there was hardly any economic intercourse between the West and the East. So there was security competition, but no economic intercourse. The situation moving forward is going to look like the pre-World War I period. It's not going to look like the Cold War. There's going to be a great deal of economic intercourse between India and China, the United States and China, Europe and China. The key issue inside the economic realm will have to do with high-edge or cutting-edge technologies. That's what the United States really cares about in terms of the competition with China. And just to take Europe and how this competition will affect Europe. There's no question, given the economic state of Europe, that European states will have a powerful incentive to want to trade with China. And the United States will tolerate that as long as Europeans don't trade cutting edge technologies to the Chinese. Because what the Americans are trying to do, as Eric knows very well, is the Americans are trying to throttle, slow down China's development of cutting edge technologies. And the United States is not going to be happy if Europe trades cutting edge technologies or technologies that feed into cutting edge technologies with China. But nevertheless, Europeans, Americans, Indians, we're going to trade with the Chinese. But at the same time, you're going to have a wicked and very dangerous security competition in East Asia for many, many years moving forward. I just want to make it clear that I was not arguing that the United States will defeat the Chinese in this economic race or in this arms race. The Chinese are incredibly impressive, and there are all sorts of reasons to think that the United States is in deep trouble and not up for arms racing, either economically or militarily, with the Chinese. I think I'm going to focus mainly on the Russia-Europe relationship moving forward. I think relations between Russia and Europe are going to be poisonous and very dangerous for as far as the eye can see. I think the April 2008 decision to bring Ukraine into NATO and then doubling down on that at every point moving forward was a disastrous mistake. It led to the February 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine and the present war that's now confronting us. I do not believe there is a meaningful peace settlement to this war. I think that the Russians on one side and the Ukrainians in the West on the other side are so far apart on what terms are satisfactory for ending the conflict that it's not going to be ended peacefully. You're going to end up with a frozen conflict. And when you get that frozen conflict, the Russians are going to be seen to have been the winners. The end result is that the West and the Ukraine will go to great lengths to undermine Russia's position in the part of Ukraine that they annex. At the same time, the Russians will go to great lengths to make sure that Ukraine is a dysfunctional rump state and do everything they can to wreck the politics and economics of Ukraine. The West, of course, save for a few countries, will have terrible relations with the Russians and do everything possible to undermine Russia's position. So if you look at just Russia versus Ukraine and Russia versus the West, in the wake of a frozen conflict, it looks terrible. Superimposed on this frozen conflict are at least 5 big potential flashpoints that could lead to a hot war. One is the Arctic, 2 is the Baltic Sea, 3 is Kaliningrad, 4 is Belarus, 5 is Moldova, and there's a 6th one, the Black Sea. These are all locations in Eastern Europe where big trouble could start and easily start because of the poisonous relations between Russia and Ukraine and between Russia and the United States. So I think moving forward, it's going to be a very difficult time for the Europeans and for the Russians and certainly for the Ukrainians.